people are like, oh, I've gone from like 10 million to 100 million or whatever. It's like, no, it was like honestly harder to get a single dollar out of someone than it was to go from to go from 1 million to like tens of millions or whatever, by far. I would be much more comfortable repeating the scaling journey than the 0 to 1 bit in terms of confidence, because the problems are just much more existential.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Before It Clicked. I'm Sunny Rekhi, and today's guest is James Hawkins, co-founder of PostHog, which is fresh off of a Series E, raising $75 million at a $1.4 billion valuation. Hundreds of thousands of people used PostHog, but the quick version is that they build developer tooling that help product engineers build successful products, help engineers understand user behavior, act on it, ship changes safely with feature flags, run experiments, and more, all built on top of the same underlying customer data. But this episode is far from a victory lap, because before PostHog clicked, James and his co-founder quit their jobs and went through several different pivots. And these weren't, I tweaked my landing page pivots. These were completely different products. They built a territory management tool, a product focused on retaining engineers, a tech debt solutions tool. And James sort of walks us through this journey, explains lessons learned, but also reflects on how he would do things differently in today's age with, AI being as potent of a force as it is. Last thing is James plugs their new product at the end of the interview, which is effectively a code editor experience that's integrated with your PostHog data, which auto-generates pull requests for you based on real user feedback, errors, and product usage. So it becomes more of a, you wake up to PRs created for you rather than having to prompt AI, to solve your problems. So if you are a builder and interested to try it, email James at posthog.com. And if you are in the idea maze right now and are sort of confused about where to go, I think this interview is full of tactical lessons. So with that, please enjoy. James, thanks for coming on the pod.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Now, PostHog is one of these, legendary YC companies now. You're fresh off of a Series E in September of last year at a unicorn valuation. Congratulations. And PostHog has crafted this brand that's loved by, hundreds of thousands of developers. And so people know that about PostHog. What they don't know is that you had a series of several pivots over several months to get here. And today, I want to put listeners in the room with you and Tim from quitting your jobs and deciding you wanted to start a business to, I think it was like 6 or 7 pivots, launching things, trying again, launching, trying again. Just so like founders can glean tactical lessons from your journey and apply it to their own. For listeners who don't know, and most will know what PostHog is, but for ones who don't, do you mind sharing what PostHog does, where you're at as a business, and then we'll wind the clock back to day one?
Yeah, sure. So basically, PostHog makes developer tools that help product engineers build successful products. We help you kind of understand user behavior, act on it, do things like release changes with feature flags, experimentation, and so on. And we simply have, I think, maybe 17 or 18 products in one. So we have a whole range of B2B tools all in one place, all built on top of the same kind of customer data. We have 300 and something thousand companies have installed our software. We get like several thousand a week at this point, are just coming in organically. Very heavy on product growth. So we are only just starting to experiment with outbound at this stage of the game. I think this is the year where we'll go past 100 million run rate, for example. So we've started super late in the process. I think what else there is to say. And yeah, it kind of means we're very heavy, very engineering-led kind of organization. We work very unusually. So we're known for like working in small teams. Engineers decide what to build, product managers don't. And so we're all remote. We're in maybe like, I don't know, 30, like probably 20 or 30 countries. And we're about 180 people, something like that at this stage.
Oh. Congratulations on crossing 100 million run rate. That's really remarkable.
That's the goal this year. It'll happen this year. It's not happened yet, but it will. It better happen, or I'm in trouble.
And a bit of a contrarian thing of y'all being fully remote and still having this crushing growth, which I'm sure a lot of VC Twitter would take umbrage at. But anyway, that's
Yep.
that's really amazing. Okay, so now let's wind back the clock to you and Tim quitting your job. You worked at
Mhm.
the same company. You were in sales. Tim was in engineering, and you decide you want to build a business. I want to ask about what day one does, but this time I also want to know along the way your reflections of those decisions, and then also like what you would do differently in today's world, which is obviously very different than 2019 when you quit your job. But let's go back to 2019. So
Yep.
you decide I want to build a business. What's the motivation there, and then what does day one look like?
Sure. So I actually decided it was even further ago that so 2019 is when I started thinking about what is when I quit and started it. It was actually back in like 2014, 2015, I think, that I actually kind of decided that I wanted to do my own thing. But I think my orientation was sort of kind of going back T minus several years before. It was um, I didn't feel like I'd worked in a series of very, very small companies, like 10 people kind of thing. I'd never worked ever in a company any larger than 10 people at that for the first couple of jobs that I did. Um, just like bootstrappy kind of companies. None of them were venture capital backed or anything. And I kept hearing people saying, you should work with good people. I was like, man, I can't see myself ever wanting to pay good people loads of money. Like, is that a thing really? Or is it just a waste of money? I was too stingy. And so I was like, I just want to work somewhere where I can see what it's like working with people who seem really clever. And I got a chance to work some with a bunch of really clever people that was venture backed. I think the thing that really helped me at postdoc later was I tried really hard in the job I had before postdoc. Like I really, really was going nuts with. I just threw myself into it. So I really was trying to make that company. I was an exec in the end, and I was really trying to make that company successful. And I'm eternally grateful that I did that first. I don't think it's a precondition at all. I mean, maybe if you're smarter than me or you work in places that have it figured out or whatever, you wouldn't need this. But for me, I found that very, very practical. Um, the company we were at had we pivoted a bunch. Well, we pivoted. We did like one large pivot. I would say we went into like top down enterprise sales. We're selling deals for like several $1 million a year. I wound up running this sales team. But I think what came true was it just felt like the product engineering side was really struggling to ship, and I didn't see that changing in the way we were working. And so I just felt like we're just not going to make this in a huge way kind of thing. Like it just, but like really have tried for like a long time. I've been here 4.5 years. I've been working constantly, trying to make this work. And I think we're actually stuck at this point. So I started thinking about then doing my own thing. And my mental model was basically, um, I think the downside, I think it's like logically irrational to not do my own thing next. Like I just think the opportunity cost of kind of like basically if this doesn't work out, I back myself to get another job afterwards anyway. And so this is a point in time where, or to frame it in very BC language, I think this is a high upside asymmetric bet, like very high upside asymmetric bet. And I can afford to take it because I've been working hard. I've made some good money. Um, and I think I've learned a bunch of things. So that was, so I had enough money where I was like, hey, I can commit doing a year full time with no funding. So I have a year basically to get to the point where this thing can stand on its own 2 feet. Um, and I was kind of wondering who would I build this with? Like I really I hadn't thought about this very hard, but it was kind of a condition in my head that I just wanted to make sure I was doing it with someone else because I felt two people would, for the same reason that when you're doing like engineering, for example, you want someone QAing your work. Like I wanted someone to QA my ideas and vice versa. Um, and frankly, I thought it would be more fun. And Tim, my co-founder, quit. He was one of the employees at the company where I was. And he was a really good engineer. Like he was good's probably the wrong word. Exceptionally fast engineer. He's become a really good engineer, I think, with time here. But back then, speed was what he was about. I was like, he's like the perfect person to build something with and get it off the ground. Um, and yeah, and he also had done a similar calculation. I think, like when I explained it to him, like, hey, I think it's like dumb that you're thinking about working somewhere else at the moment. Would you like to try this? And it happened that he had saved up money and could afford to also take that bet at the start. We're very far removed from Silicon Valley. Like we're working in a company in London. I don't even live in London. I live in like a tertiary kind of city in the UK. We had no idea how to get capital or anything like that. And so that's kind of why I think we're going into it, the mentality of like, we need to be able to make this work kind of bootstrapped to start off with. And then once we started playing the game, we're like, okay, let's just try doing this YC application form. And it turned out that you just fill out a form. If you do a good job, you can get in, even if you don't know people. So, but yeah, that was some of the like thought process that was going on sort of just before the journey started.
That's helpful. I didn't know that you had come from basically completely out of this world altogether, outside of the sort of Silicon Valley-esque world. Okay, so you both quit. Makes a lot of sense. What does day one look like?
It's pretty grim. We had no office space or anything. So day one was Tim was working 5 days a week, or a bit more realistically, and I was doing 3 and then doing 2 days of like consulting. So I agreed so I could like make a little bit of money to pay for things like incorporating the company, paying taxes, just like random costs that we didn't pay for a domain. I really wanted to be working more than that. So I was like, okay, I'll do a few months of consulting. I'll build up a balance a little bit as a business. I'll just put everything in. And we'll go from there. We were working from coffee shops. Like, yeah, we had and so we would, when we're meeting potential customers for our ideas, it started to get really aggravating. Where it's like, every time we go out and do a customer meeting, which we always want to try and do in person, we have to leave the coffee shop, which means we have to buy another round of coffees, which is like eating into our budget. And so we were being really, really thrifty with spending. And simply because we had like personally, for example, I had a list of every single expense in my life, how much money I'd budgeted towards this thing, and I could literally see my personal burn when I'd hit zero, and if I was like default, like how long I had, and I knew that I was like default dead basically. And so I was like, well, if I can like, like I had like a good car, I swapped it out for a crappy car. And I was like, maybe I should like Airbnb one of the rooms in my house, like order and trying to think of ways to like give us just as long as possible to make sure it worked. So yeah, it was very much, we weren't playing offense, we're playing defense quite a bit with just trying to make sure we could survive a while and give ourselves as much time as possible. Tim was basically just building all the time at the start, and I was generally hustling to get to talk to customers with the two roles mostly.
Can I ask, where are the ideas coming from? How did you generate the ideas for Tim to build in the first place? What did that look like?
I had a list. I've been sort of creating a list of problems that I'd encountered professionally. And that was the list. It was like 3 whole pages of things. None of them worked, is basically what happened in practice. But that was the list. It was like, what are the things that I found annoying professionally? Having thought quite hard about, having been thoughtful around the business I was in, I think was very helpful for generating ideas that at least made me feel like they might work at the start. And so we started batching through this list. But that was really simplistically, it was a big list I had in a Google Doc of pain points.
Makes sense. So, over what time period had you built this list? I'm assuming over a few years. Is that fair?
Or like, 2 years, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. And then the first question I have hearing this description is, why build at all? Why not just go interview customers, both of you, and sort of figure out if there's something there?
Yeah, so I'm actually a really big non-believer in how well you can validate stuff up front. It's obviously very dangerous territory. Like a stereotypical way for a developer to fail is you just hide and build things, never talk to anyone, and then you build something that no one cares about apart from you. So just with that cautionary tale in mind, I think this might have been because both of us sucked at product. I had quite a lot of go-to-market background. I bootstrapped a company that it was owned by someone else, but I was entirely running it before the job before. And so I'd done an awful lot of like paid marketing, call it analytics stuff. I was the only developer. I was the only technical one there. So I was also doing some code. Then I wound up as a VP of sales selling compliance software at a lot of banks. So I had quite a like fairly commercial background, but with some technical stuff in it. Whereas Tim was very much like a developer through and through. What neither of us had was any kind of product experience or thinking. And we'd never seen it product carried out somewhere kind of world-class at product. As a result, our validation was terrible of ideas. We talked to users and just be like, would you pay for this? Would you use this thing? Blah, 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 blah. And of course, especially as we're in the UK mostly, they're all saying, oh yes, of course, no problem. I would definitely do that thing. This was even worse when we were trying to work on ideas that related to go-to-market, because I had a lot of ideas as a VP of sales about things that had annoyed me. And people who run sales teams are have a high propensity to take meetings and act super positive and jazz about anything, and then not to follow through with anything they're saying. Whereas, because they're kind of extroverted, outgoing kind of people. Whereas, like one of the reasons we eventually pivoted into dev tools was we basically were like, man, it's super annoying. Like, there's a huge getting product market fit feels like a multivariate problem where if you can remove some of the variables that are causing uncertainty, like it gives you anything that gives you a little bit better signal to noise ratio, basically, is a huge deal. And having a stakeholder that you're building for that gives kind of confusing signal about what they want, we felt was a bad move. And so we felt developers are just kind of blunt. Support people we also thought would be kind of like this. People who don't add kind of any kind of pitching, like salesiness or marketing over the top of something and will just say what they're thinking, I thought would be much more practical to land a product for. Like if you read like Hacker News, people absolutely shred the like ideas and things that people are building on there in a way that's actually kind of predictable. And so we just thought, man, we're just not good enough a product to pull this off in front of this. So as a result, for us, what worked was putting product into people's hands as quickly as humanly possible and then seeing what happened, as opposed to like getting a lot like spending 3 months deeply researching something that doesn't make any sense. I think we validated much better on doing. I think if we're exceptional product people, perhaps we get away with this, or if we have better taste, which we also didn't have at the start of the journey either. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with being good at product. In a way that we didn't have good taste and we were bad at doing validation. So yeah, I think and with AI and like the speed of building now I think it's like kind of like just like if someone's trying to like validate ideas with me and they haven't built anything at all, like I don't really want to take a call anymore because I kind of basically consider it lazy. Or like I think it's either lazy or this person's incompetent. And I'm like, well, I don't want to spend my time with someone that is wasting my time because of this. Whereas if someone's like made a real effort at doing something or building something cool, I will give feedback on it. As the kind of person now gets asked to give feedback on ideas. So yeah, I'm much bigger proponent of this. The proviso needs to be you can't spend 6 months or a year. You really have to find a way to get it in a matter of like weeks into people's hands, I think, because you have so much chance of getting it wrong.
I want to ask more about that. So, just to recap what you just said, the first issue was you guys hadn't really known about the mom test, and therefore the questions were very high level. Would you pay for this? They'd say yes. You'd go build it, and in fact, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
But then number two was the personas that you began with were just very kind personas that were okay,
Yeah.
sort of not eating into you guys, and so that's why part of the reason you pivoted to developers in the first place was because you felt they'd be more blunt. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I also
Okay.
felt there would be better problem solvers. Like, as in, I felt like they would try to solve their problems more. Like they would just. I think there's a reason someone becomes like a developer because they kind of just go deep enough. Like they really try to actually, like they don't just go, oh, it's cool that you can build stuff. They're like, I wonder how I can build this thing. Okay, now I'm writing code. Blah blah blah. So I think their mentality is they try to make things work a little bit more. But, rather than click one button, it doesn't do it, and I've just moved on and forgotten about it entirely. So yeah, I think that was a huge deal to us being successful.
Can I ask of your 3-page Google Docs full of ideas? Did you
Mhm.
stack rank this by TAM, um, like what the wedge would be, stuff like this? Was there any of this thinking? Was it just pain? Here's a product and how that
Yeah.
works.
Uh, yeah, I think it was honestly, it was out of desperation. It was like, what is the one where we could see us getting one customer for? I was like, where can we get that first dollar? Because once that starts happening, um, and like the first dollar you make on the internet is, people are like, oh, I've gone from like 10 million to 100 million or whatever. It's like, no, it was like, honestly harder to get a single dollar out of someone than it was to go from to go from 1 million to like tens of millions or whatever, by far. I would be much more comfortable repeating the scaling journey than the 0 to 1 bit in terms of confidence, because the problems are just much more existential in the early stages. Um, yeah, we were just, it was kind of fair. It's like, man, like literally no one cares what paying and talking at one customer. And so we're just trying to, it was just kind of like, what do we think we could actually land a single one for?
Okay.
Realistically, it wasn't anything more ambitious. I think that was a mistake. Like, I actually think that was a huge error. I think that was an error. Like, if I'm building a startup now, it'd be very different the way I think about these problems. But back then, that's the truth of what actually was happening.
I'd actually love to hear about that. So, what would you do differently in that case? You wouldn't focus on that first dollar?
No, I think we didn't have any confidence in our, we had confidence in our process. Like, I kind of knew that we're building, we are actually getting this in people's hands. We're quickly figuring out if this stuff's working. it's like, I'm going to score a goal eventually because I'm taking lots of shots at the goal, but I'm not, maybe naturally I might be a terrible footballer or whatever. I think now though, from a place of more confidence, I would be kind of, and again, I think this is something that, how can I express this? I think the world is under-indexed on solving problems that have the biggest impact and over-indexed on the ones that are easy to get from 0 to 1 on. So, for example, I think there is like probably way too much B2B software in the world and way too little like spaceships, or curious for, or like, like I have a friend who's working on, he essentially wants to build a model for chemistry that uses kind of, it's super, super technical. It can predict chemical reactions, but like it could literally solve all of human disease if it works. I think those kind of ideas are so much more inspiring that it's kind of, this assumes you actually want to run a venture-backed company. But I think that style of idea has such a higher potential impact. And it's exactly the kind of, like, that's how you build a company that's like the size of Google or Anthropic or whatever else. And I think then it's kind of easier to raise money so that you can actually like have time and get expertise and get the tools you need to make it happen. It's easier to get customers because it's a hell of a lot easier to market something that's exciting than something that's not exciting. And it's just more fun. And so you're kind of more engaged in what you're doing rather than like desperately trying to get like $10 a month out of someone. We're going, hey, like this would really help the world. And so I think, and things like AI and software development getting so much faster. I mean, you can be more ambitious in terms of what you try to build, but the expectation at the same time has been rising. Like, it is no longer enough for software to like, it used to be like a series of logical things you do, like, basically it's a bunch of forms. Like, I want to click buttons, text input, submit, like book the thing, whatever. Whereas now it literally has to feel like magic to sprint by itself on the internet. Like people have, I don't know, like watching, like the Claude thing, for example, is a good example where it's just nuts what it can do. It's super dangerous and scary and whatever, but that's the kind of thing that actually gets a ton of growth, and it could become very large in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I think in general, though, I would aim for ideas that are inherently very, very ambitious. Come up with, and then I would work backwards. What is some kind of game plan to get this to give us the finance as a means to an end of achieving the ambitious goal, as opposed to like, oh my God, we just need to make like $100 a month to start off with. You're going to be at that point at some point, but I think it's actually kind of perversely harder when your idea is like kind of boring in the first place and not big enough, and it won't be inspiring enough to get, there's not enough story or like kind of marketing around that. A post that was wound up happening is we kind of realized the inspiring version of our thing is to like literally just build all of the software, and kind of have every single, like an obscene number of products in one. And, we're just continuing to reinvent what we're working on. But we really haven't just scaled like a single thing. But we could have picked something that was more ambitious still, I think, out of the gate if we started again. But I think we've got there through, as we've gained confidence, as we've started getting off the ground, we've shifted what we're doing dramatically. And we went multi-product very early, for example, even though you're not like supposed to do that. But yeah, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. But I would pick things that are very ambitious and that I would find very inspiring. And that would be problem. I would be working backwards from like, how can you help humanity in some way, shape, or form, and kind of working back from there, as opposed to maybe the small problems that I've had in my life. Because I think those things will get very saturated very quickly because software development's got so much more competitive.
Yes. I have a follow-up question there, which is, now James, the unicorn founder, can raise a ton of capital for something very ambitious, but the James who nobody knew, do you think it still would have made sense for him to do this like capital-intensive, more ambitious product? Could he have commanded the capital that would require?
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I think things like YC, I think, are an excellent place to give you the confidence. Like, if you're an outsider, realistically, I think that would be extremely hard unless you can figure out some clever way to get there without funding. I would be doing things like applying to YC or trying to get like the kind of coaching, the network, all that stuff that comes with it, to do that. So, or like doing something small. Yeah, it's tough. I actually don't know. I don't have a control. I think I would have failed at that out of the gate, but also if I'd said I just didn't have the underlying confidence. So I think it depends on who you are as a person. Like, if you're really, really deeply passionate about something, I think it could carry you through the meetings, but you've really got to like let it go, like fully lean into the idea. Like you've got to be supremely confident. You really have to like get that out and not hold back. Like I think I was worried about, I don't know, like when we raised our seed round, for example, I was kind of people pleasing. Like I was saying the stuff that I thought investors wanted to hear from me, as opposed to like truly having a strong enough opinion myself and just expressing that. And so I kind of wish, like, had I gone in, like, if you were coming up with some wild, massive idea, you can't go into it like with trying to placate investors. You have to go in and say like, look, this stuff is going to be an absolute shit show. This thing's going to be sick if it works. These are the things that are going to go wrong. Like this is exactly how this is going to work. Like, but I am telling you how this is going to happen. I'm not like here kind of treating you like a consultant or something. Whereas I would have been much more like, well, what do you think we should be spending this money on? Like, we'll do a bit of revenue, a bit of open source growth. Like,
Yeah.
it's all a bit of a compromise. We're kind of on the fence and it was a bit wet. It's only when we started kind of getting teeth and getting opinionated that we realized like we can pull off like big fundraising rounds. We can like do cool things on the internet that everyone talks about. Like, like we did this like nuts website, for example, which was like loads of people think is like super stupid because they're like, oh, it's going to screw up the conversion rate. And we're like, no, we just actually think this is going to work for a bunch of reasons. And so kind of just the bolder we've gotten, the better it's worked. But it's been me fighting kind of that confidence, that experience, bit of Britishness in the early days. So I think it's very personality. I think personality is probably the top thing I think that would affect your ability to do this. Like Adam Newman didn't do YC, for example, raise a shitload of money. I know the business didn't work, but like it is technically possible.
Well, makes sense. Okay, so Tim's building, you're selling. Tim will ship, hand you the product. You'll go talk to folks. You'll realize there isn't enough pull here, and you'll trash it. Now you have this great blog post called "A Story About Pivots," which we'll put in the show notes. But there's a line where you say maybe some of the products that we killed, we could have actually made work if we just kept iterating on them.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is like a perennial challenge for all founders. Like, do I pivot or do I sort of persist here? What mental models did you build up along the way when you were doing this?
I think the main one was, if you imagine your startup's a child, and if you're just declared, my kid is going to be a pro NFL player, no matter what. And then they just kind of suck at it. Like it's happening. Like they're able to catch and throw a ball, but they're kind of like in the bottom end of the team, or they don't make the team, or they're really like, you're just not going to achieve the kind of outcome you want, which means you're going to end up if you raise venture capital, and like you want to be that kind of company, you're just misaligned with what investors want. You're just going to have a bad time. And so we're like, maybe you would eventually get there and you'd have some kind of like mediocre career in the NFL or whatever. Whereas we felt like if we can just find something we're naturally quite good at and kind of know what we're doing and we're kind of getting traction kind of easily, it will mask, like we'll just fill in the gaps much more straightforwardly. So it's kind of like, let's try a few different sports and see which one feels good to us. Like where do people feel easy to get hold of? Where do we manage to get like a bit of real usage happening quite quickly? Where we feel like we have lots of ideas for what to work on. We're enjoying the idea that we're working on too. And then we'll lean in very hard to that thing. And so, yeah, we had a couple of ideas. Like one of them, for example, we just weren't very inspired by. And like, it felt like it was we're trying to solve something to do with retaining engineers. And this was kind of during like 2020 when it was getting like super competitive to hire people. But we just didn't really like what we discovered by building it that we didn't really enjoy that industry. It felt like we were just trying to really sell a lot. It just felt kind of lame. And so we just didn't really want to continue doing it. We worked on ideas to do a technical debt, where we would give engineers a little survey after each pull request, to be like, hey, what slowed you down? Let's try and like aggregate this data across your whole team to work out where time is being lost, and we can visualize it against the like files that are being touched in each PR, for example. And again, we're getting lots of usage. It seemed like the problem was definitely there. But Tim and I were like, we just don't feel like we don't know how to solve this problem. Like with the first product we built to solve that problem we couldn't get any money for it because we hadn't actually solved it. We were just merely being a way for engineers to complain. And that meant the companies wouldn't pay. It was really hard to get money out of people for it. But we didn't know how to actually solve that problem back then. Like you could probably go back in now with some AI thing and it would be much easier to solve. And then we felt like in our heart of hearts, we're very scrappy. We're not kind of like an engineer's engineer, if that makes sense. Like we're much more on the like, let's get something going end. And so some like code quality fanatic, like test driven development kind of engineer would have been way better suited to that problem. We learned that by sort of just doing it. So we were like kind of paying attention, not just to like how much money we're making from this product, but or like, how much usage are we getting? It's kind of like, what's the vibe? Like, is it feeling really tough to convince people to do stuff? Like the technical debt idea, we're like, okay, let's try and make some like real revenue now. We're getting a bunch of usage. Let's go and do it. And so we worked really hard to make some money. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, let's just like dial it in to talk to our customers to see if they'll pay for the product. Like, we were visiting all of them in person. So we'd like, and because I'd sold my car, it was like, okay, now we've got to get like a bunch of trains and buses to get to this customer in person to see if they'll spend like $300 a month with us. And so I was trying, like, I took it as seriously as I would have taken like $1 million a year enterprise contract in my previous job. I was like, this is like, we're getting these sold, but it's so ridiculously hard to get. I feel like we're having to try far too hard here. Like, we're just not solving this problem enough. The problem's not significant enough. There's something wrong. So you kind of, just we're looking for like a level of ease once we're up and running with things and looking for signals around that, basically.
Yeah. So it's less about like, okay, I'm going to talk to 30 people who I believe are the ICP, and if none of them buy, then I'm going to move on. And it's far more about intuition. Does it feel like I'm really struggling to push this? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. And like, if we, and it's like, it's kind of okay if we're not closing anything. If we're like, oh no, we've got tons of things we're really excited about. We just have to get those things done. Now we're building a product at PostHog right now that feels like that, where we're like, oh, this has like, we asked for feedback on it internally, and we've got this massive list of things where it's like, oh, it doesn't do this. It's broken in this way. This is a bug. This is terrible, blah, 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 blah. But like, we're so jazzed about the idea. We're like, cool, we're just going to like hammer through all the things, and then we're going to come back around and do this again. Whereas there are other days where we lose steam, where we're like, we just actually don't really know how to solve this, or we're not even getting to the feedback. But yeah, it was very much intuition as opposed to like some very scientific numerical method. I mean, there are like broad concepts you're looking for. Like, can we get anyone to talk? Like, are we able to get people to talk to about it? Like, will anyone use it? Will anyone pay for it? Or like, can we get several people paying for it? And kind of very broadly the gates that you're trying to get through. But it wasn't more precise than that, really. And the vibe we're paying attention to the whole way through.
Yeah. So PostHog was the 6th product you built in the 9 months. Was that your first PLG product, or were there others along the way?
No, we built the technical debt thing was PLG. I would say mostly PLG. Like, it kind of, if you got one engineer, they would install this thing in their GitHub repo, and it would run on every pull request. And we end up getting like pretty like a team. We go from 1 to like 100 engineers pretty quickly. From PLG. I was doing sales to get the first one because we didn't have any marketing or brand awareness or anything. But there was an element of that there. All of the other ideas were much more traditional. Like, we're messaging people, hopping a call, doing a demo, giving them a sign up link, getting payment details from them, that sort of thing. But yeah.
What did you change from idea 1 to idea 5? How did you improve the process?
I wish we improved more. Switching the stakeholder for one was like a huge deal. It was just much easier engineers just felt easier to work with. And I don't know if that's because we're quite technical people at heart. Like, it's much more our soul. Like, I've had like, Tim's like an engineer. I've had like a bunch of roles, but I feel like a technical soul at heart. Like, I just sort of, there's something I like about that audience in particular, and like the thoughtfulness and effort that people go to in engineering. And so switching that was a huge deal. I think we got better at, we started getting a little bit better. It's just like really basic stuff, like things like the quality of the websites and stuff we were producing started going up. Like, we started realizing, especially for developer tooling, we're like, everyone is going to look at the website before they talk to us. And so the website's the sales team. Like, we need to actually put a little bit of effort into this thing. And that was massively rewarded when we launched PostHog, putting much more effort in than, it wasn't like a ridiculous amount of effort, but it was much more than anyone else would put in. And that was unbelievably important to just just to write out who we were, what we're doing. That's public handbook. We probably had like a 30 or 40 page. We had all the documentation. We had API documentation. We probably just had like maybe 30 or 40 page website. Whereas most startups back then would just be like a single page, which just looks throwaway and like they don't care. And so yeah, just taking that little bit more care over the way you present yourselves online is probably the other shift that. And frankly, that's because we got better at building freaking websites, because we had to build like 5 or 6 by then. So it's like, okay, I'm more comfortable with like how to do this quickly. I think those are the main ones. The rest didn't really change that dramatically. But I think it's also more just not getting disheartened as well. Like, there's almost skill in the consistency of like, we know that this may not work, and the second idea may not work, and the 10th idea may not work. We will get to an idea eventually. It is reasonable to assume we'll probably get to an idea that eventually works. And it's basically about not giving up versus being magical wizard. So we just need to be persistent. Like, when I was I don't know, like I did, it was really into cycling. Like I did cycling as a job for a bit, a long, long time ago. And one of the things that really stood, there were like, some people were naturally gifted, but a lot of people who were doing it as a career um, were just persistent. They just didn't stop. um, and so we kind of like, it was actually more the persistence, I think, was just there underneath where I just know full well, like if postdoc hadn't worked, I truly feel we would have just kept going with ideas for a really long time. Like until we basically had our hand forced by not having enough money. And then maybe even then we'd have worked it out. Like I think we would have definitely gotten the full year that we committed to at least. But I could have seen us going further. I think we're both having a nice time whilst we're getting loads of rejection, but we didn't sort of, we were kind of chill about it. It didn't really get us down. It was kind of stressful and challenging, but not kind of, people talk about like pivot hell. Um, but it didn't, we were like compartmentalizing the stress quite heavily, I think. Like it's like a computer game, basically, is how I would think about it.
Yeah. Your first set of ideas came from problems that you experienced, but some of your intermediate ideas came from problems you experienced while building the other products.
Yeah.
Could you give a couple? I know PostHog was one of those examples, but before PostHog, could you give like another one example of you feeling like, hey, I had this pain from building product A, therefore I will build product B.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it didn't always work out. We built like one of the early tools we built was a tool that would automatically, my basic theory was when you're doing sales, you're literally wasting 95% of your whole team's time. Because most deals don't close. They will just float around. They like won't close one, and they also won't close lost. Just like they kind of die on the vine pretty slowly instead, and then you've still got them in people's like territory lists. And given that a sales team is usually like 60% of a company's spending, like so much of the world's like money is going into a bunch of accounts in Salesforce that no one's ever really going to pick up on. And so we tried to build this like we built an automatic like territory management tool that would like slot into Salesforce. Um, and would use statistics to like pull out deals and go, hey, this thing has been like, we can tell from your other deals that this deal is so unlikely to sell based on like the lack of engagement and progress here that we're going to remove it from your territory. We're going to swap in a new account. That idea didn't work out. I think again, there were lots of reasons why it didn't work out, but in doing that, we're like, oh, maybe we should, and then we're like, okay, now I'm trying to track the deals that we're doing. And I was like, oh, why don't we just build the whole, like maybe like another startup in this situation trying to get its first customers? We should build a CRM for like really early stage startups. But we'll build like this territory management thing into it, for example, to like prioritize your time. That also did not work out. I think because it was sort of like, now we're just trying to, it's like super competitive. Like the branding's not good enough. We don't stand out. The thing we built into it isn't actually working anyway. And now we're trying to like convert what we built into something useful, which is very dangerous territory, I think, to be in. But later on postdoc, this did work very effectively where we're like, oh, every one of these like previous 5 ideas have been annoying to set up event tracking. Like we need to see how many users we have, if they're coming back or not. And in order to do this, we've had to like wrangle like with our now competitors, like one in particular, like it's like we have to talk to their sales team. We have to negotiate a deal. And it's for like $200 a month, and we have like no money either. And it's like, why they like this feels like some weird enterprise procurement thing for like 2 technical people, and like we can't inspect the data. The pricing's not on the pricing page. There's like all these penalties if you guess your usage wrong. Like it's so unfriendly. It's like we could just build this with developers first and foremost in mind that don't want to deal with this kind of bullshit, basically. And I think they'll like it because that's what we would have picked, and that did work. And we'll make it open source, so we're not losing data to ad blockers and that sort of thing. And then we're like, oh, actually, if we just do open source product analytics when we launch, like as a reader of Hacker News, I just know that will go on the front page and do well there. And so that was sort of the whole process that did actually then eventually work. But I think it's because it wasn't like us converting an idea into something new. It was very much like this is kind of just like fresh thing that's
Yeah.
irritating us.
I want to talk about the origin of PostHog, but before I do, one of the YC partners' advice to pivoting founders is stay within the market such that your insights will compound. You guys didn't do this. I'm curious, was that a
Yeah.
mistake? You still recommend that for other founders? And how did you think about this?
I think we would have kept going in DevTools if we'd not succeeded. But yeah, maybe the market, stay in the market is an interesting one. I think we just didn't know. Yeah, maybe we just weren't patient enough. I think it's probably a personality clash that we have with that. I think we're not patient enough to spend. I think we're too. Um, this doesn't make us look good, but I think it's one of the things where because we're at the start because we weren't that confident. I don't think we're in a position of strength to go, okay, it's chill. We're going to learn everything there is to do with like retaining engineers, and we're going to find a way to make this happen. For example, instead, it was much more like, oh my God, this isn't working. We're going to die and run out of money. We have to find a different idea that works more quickly. And so, yeah, it might be that we got lucky that we hopped around like this and did this very wide search rather than sort of like learning the whole industry. But I think that's like naivety and probably perhaps like not something to recommend. It's very hard to know. Or maybe it's like easier because it's like, oh, it turns out, I don't know, like you work in like, uh, the oil and gas industry. You're like, oh, like this is kind of dying or whatever. Like this, no matter what you do, it sucks. Like we should just very quickly get out of this thing. Whereas if you hopped into like tech in like 2020, you'd be like, oh my God, like I can't walk for making like 7 figures, like almost, no matter what I'm doing. And so I think there is something for like a wider search. Like this is like whole genre feel kind of easy. If the market's good, it will just pull us with it. And the markets felt like they sucked for the ideas we had before. Like there's an Andrew Horowitz thing on this where like ultimately a good market, a product will be formed by a good market. So I think it was actually more that we were going in that sort of direction. It turned out the market in the early days was there's a whole bunch of engineers who want to, who care about what they're building, and they're really badly serviced by all these existing companies for usually like stupid reasons or on go to market rather than the actual product functionality reasons. But that's something that resonates with us as a problem, and so we went and built it. So I think there's sort of yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. And for us, I don't think that advice was correct, thinking about it. But there's like a mixture of like personality there, uh, which
Right.
maybe just wouldn't be right for us. Yeah.
Your whole time from product 1 to 6, were you staying focused on, "Let's just get someone to pay us that really needs it," or was it did you ever expand the focus there?
Can you clarify a little bit more what you mean by that? So do
Yeah,
we?
like, you said at alternate times, like, yeah, we wanted, like, several people to pay us, but it wasn't thinking
Yeah.
beyond that. It was just like, we want a group of folks who really like us, who want it. There was
Yeah.
no concern about TAM, no concern about competitive analysis. Did that stay true the entire time?
Yeah, I think we didn't not think about it, but we just thought uh, like with the dev toolsy stuff, we're like, well, people like we just think any developer could use this, and so we weren't worried about the size of the industry. Um, I think when we did kind of yeah, like when we built like open source product analytics, so basically any developer building something should have an understanding of who's using their thing. And so our town is kind of like any project that's being built from scratch, where you would basically add like error tracking and analytics into it, a few basic bits and pieces. And so like that just feels very big to us, and so it'll be fine. Again, it's probably the nature of the product. Like for example, another idea we had that I think this would have been more of a concern was if we didn't do this in the end. I kind of wish I mean, it would have been really fun. But I was like, man, every time we go to like, I went on this holiday to Italy, and in these like in their gas stations, you can get espresso or cappuccino and nothing else. And what's happening is someone is like continuously making espresso. Like they're not making it when you order it; it's just being made like all day. And some other person is just like putting milk to or frothing milk to put on like half of the espresso, like on half of them to make cappuccinos. And there's no like, skinny caramel latte with like macadamia nut milk or something. I was like, man, this would be really fun. We could like, could we set up a coffee? I used to get coffee on the way to work every day, and those other people do. Could we basically charge like instead of charging like $7 or $8, could we charge like two? Like in Italy, it's really cheap. It's like €1 or €1.50 or whatever. It's like, could we charge like through $2 and go outside the busiest stations in the busiest places on earth? And the reason it's cheap is there's literally 2 coffee types. They're not made to order. We're selling thousands of them, and that's it. So there's I mean, with that idea, perhaps the town would have been small because it'd been like, how many places are busy enough to support this kind of model? It's probably not a venture scale business. So that would have been the only one really. I think that like that sort of idea is like, okay, it's a bit more questionable if this is going to work as a venture business, but maybe it just should have been a fun project
Yeah, yeah.
to work on instead.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so knowing what you know about 2026 and AI dropping the cost of software creation, how would you do things differently? How would you recommend pivoting founders, prospective founders, think about your ideation process differently today?
Yeah, so I think for your product to stand out, like I think the bar is you really have to realize how high the bar is. I think that's the primary shift. Like I think if you are not genuinely, I think if you want your thing to like blow up on the internet, which is what most people want to happen, um, I think you need to feel like your product is like you have to be impressed by your own product. Basically, if it's like some hacky thing that doesn't really work properly, I think you're going to really struggle. But you should be able to get there much, much faster. So I think there's this sort of, I almost feel like half the skill in building um, a company that does cool things is the psychology of I can build this. So to make that like tangible, we have a data warehouse at PostHog. Um, and the first conversation we had with non-engineers was basically, we think we should build a data warehouse. And he was like, you're out of your mind. There are like $45 billion competitors. There's like one that's like $100 billion. They're like these mammoths. These are this insanely complicated piece of software to build. It's like so much infrastructure, blah, 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 blah. And then my co-founder was like, if I held a gun to your head and compelled you to build a data warehouse now, walk me through what you would do step by step. And 10 minutes later, he's like, this is such a cool idea. We can totally build this. I see no reason we can't do this anymore. And so like kind of the mental hurdle was just like, you kind of just can, like, you can just do things, right? And I think with AI stuff in particular, what you need to realize that you can do is like, you can now build like kind of anyone who's like kind of technical, you can build like the most ridiculous experiences possible that are you can build something remarkable now in a way that you would not have been able to even 2 years ago. So if you're not aiming to build something remarkable, people are not going to care because other people will build remarkable stuff. And so your thing is going to look crappy and people won't trust it because it's going to look like you're a bad developer. Your data is going to get leaked. It's not going to be secure. It's not going to be very valuable. And then you look at it and you're being compared to like, you're literally being compared to like something that Anthropic has built, for example. And so it's sort of, yeah, the bar is super high, but you're super able to get over a very high bar now. And like, that's a real shift, I think, mentally for people to go through. Because like marketing, go to market, like sales, marketing and stuff, very easy when your thing is just really cool that you're working on. And so just kind of bear that in mind whilst you're building now is like a really big shift. That you can embrace so much more scope, or it can be so much deeper, or so much more painful, the problems you're solving, if you're willing to mentally accept, like the mental acceptance of what's possible, I think is actually almost the hardest part now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Basically, the TLDR there is like the MVP, the M and the MVP is now like a very, very different meaning, and that the thing you ship, the V1 of it is actually has to be quite advanced. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, and then you should also realize it's possible to do that quick, kind of fast, right? But yes, I think those two things are both true now.
Yeah. I had an interview unpublished yet, but well, at some point with the founder of Metronome, Scott Woody, who told Stripe for $1 billion, and he said part of the thing that drove Metronome was he was paranoid that as soon as he launches Metronome, a bunch of companies are going to try and copy his usage-based billing model, and so he intentionally chose an idea that would insulate him from competition. And he thinks it's even more pernicious now with AI because you'll attract competition much faster. How do you think about that now? How did you think about that with PostHog in your V1 stage? And how should founders think about that now?
We actually really we realized competition was a good thing for us in the early days. I think because we weren't good enough at product. And basically, if there's competition with traction, people care about that problem. That's a huge tick in the like validation journey of your idea. And so for us, I'm like, you can actually just cheat and skip to stage 2 of this thing if you work in an industry that is fiercely competitive. The downside is the industry is very competitive. The upside is also that it's very competitive because it means that there are customers and it's people are making money there. And so we kind of realized we just think it is much easier to build a better version of something that exists than it is to conceive of an idea for the first time in history. Like it's probably way easier now to build I want to build a model training company. I'm going to build the best model in the world at X is much less challenging academically or like intellectually than the first person that came up with a concept of a large language model. That's kind of genius. Whereas a large language model, like something like a large language model, but for audio or for video or like this sort of twist on it, like these ideas have all worked for people. And so I think kind of like the twist on something that has traction is a really easy way to shortcut finding something that people care about a bit more easily. For us, it was like product analytics, but it's open source. It's kind of for developers. Like these are, but they're like fundamentals of the product are very similar to like 3 others that all are 100 million plus run rate companies. I think it's easy. Don't index on like fundraising though. Like just because companies rate, like you have competitors that raise like $100 million. If they don't have any customers, you haven't shortcutted that first part of the process still. And so just be very aware of that. But for us, it worked super well and competition, but it does mean you have to care more about standing out. And so like the bar is higher for what you do. Your marketing has to be better. You have to be stronger on differentiation, basically, and less strong product. Or like the product has to be more different or whatever. But like standing out is basically the challenge now.
Yeah. But you did incorporate, did you incorporate any defensive posturing? Because you knew when you launched, you knew when your thing went viral, there's a bunch of smart engineers thinking, I can do
Yeah.
the exact same thing and I'm going to launch that too. How did you think about this?
Yeah, it just hasn't. So what then happened next? I think this actually helped us, to be honest. Like we made everything public. So we put like strategy public. We have like a roadmap that's out there. You can publicly see like what people are asking for and stuff. The code's open source, like pretty much like vast majority of it's MIT license. And there are people that have like followed the repo and cracked it and made it free um and like all our competition started building like multiple products because they saw us getting traction with multi-product and were shouting about it so much. But I actually think in the end that's going to have been the best way possible to derail your competition. Like if you make something that's really sexy and has loads of um and it's very public and because people will like your competition will copy probably, um, which means they won't win. It was our thought process. Like we think we're just going to be able to like if we go really wide, we'll always be slightly ahead because we're like fully learned. We just care more about putting this off. We back our ability to execute. It means our competitors are looking at us instead of their customers. Um, and now they're not playing to their strengths. They're playing our game, which we're ahead of them at, rather than their game, which would have been like enterprise sales, for example. And now they're going to end up sucking at both in the long run, is what I think will happen. And so, actually, by having something that I think it pulls your competitors towards you, which actually I think means but you can pull them to the game that you want to play at least. And if they already have a bunch of big customers, it's going to be hard to go multi-product, for example. Um, Even though the price looks bigger, it's going to be really tough. And so we really did think about the dynamics of this. And we kind of concluded like, actually, it doesn't feel intuitive, but I think this is going to work really, really well for us if we do this. I think AI probably makes it like, you do have to think like, is there some kind of defensibility around this? Like, for example, ours, the defensibility was like, we just have so much surface area, infrastructure, blah, 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 blah. Like now it's basically data. Whereas if I was going to build like a Claude wrapper or something, um, I think that's not enough. Like you have to really, really distinctly build something very, very, like, you have to build like a beautiful version of Figma, like literally something that is as good as Figma and as good as Claude Code in the same place. And so it's like a
Yeah.
perfect web design and product design experience or something like that, rather than just like, you can use two Claude agents at once or something, which like, because they will then copy. So yeah, you will get competition. You need to have enough remote, but being very open about it can just pull them in away from what they probably should be doing to get bigger. And then they're not competing, but suck at the thing they're competing at, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're not super worried about this kind of thing. And as I'm listening to you talk, I think, the 3 months of, let's say it takes 3 months to launch an MVP, 3 months 3 years ago produced a pretty shitty MVP, but 3 months now can produce a really amazing product. And either
Yeah.
way, you're still insulated from competition by about those 3 months. And as long as you maintain your lead there, you'll be fine. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like I think that was like a superb time to have lots of competition. Like there's like going to be tons of legacy companies that are desperately struggling to um, get AI first feeling. Everyone looking for new tools is going to be looking for the AI first version of the thing because they're not going to want to buy the legacy. But like not everyone, but like there's been a lot of people thinking like this. And so it's a brilliant time to be competing with the AI first version of like legacy, lots of pieces of legacy SaaS that's not good at handling, that hasn't been thought through from scratch. Um, Sort of thing. Like we're building like a AI first product. One of our products we're building is AI first at the moment is like literally going to wind up being different domain name, different products entirely, for this reason. Because we're like, oh, we need to because initially I was like, God, we have to like transform all our UX to be completely different because like we can build something better now, which is going to mean dragging along like 300,000 customers. And they're like, no. If we actually build like this other thing from nothing, we have no baggage. We can literally run it like a 2-person company.
Mm,
With like much more resource and blah 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 blah. So we can like nail this. But like that's a big decision to take. Kind of
yeah.
thing. A lot of people won't be that pushing that hard. Like Intercom did a really good job of this, for example, too. And so yeah, I think competition is a brilliant thing to have. So
Yeah.
you need some way of explaining rationally how you're not going to get completely screwed by this. And then I think the other thing is as well, like it might be like, well, your competitor's like a blob like this size, and you're a blob that's like way, way smaller. But the whole market you're in is really big. Like the competitor hasn't saturated the market either. Like it
Yeah.
may not even matter if they like steal a bunch of your customers. Like, for example, like if Azure, like, AWS offers a service, um, You can then get the same thing in GCP and Azure. GCP and Azure will make a crap ton of money anyway, even if they don't freaking wait. Like coming second, like in that kind of scale market, they're going to be making like billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like it's really super easy. I think positive competition definitely be a positive thing. Um, maybe like platform risk, like you don't want to build on top of something that's going to kill you. Like feels like a much scarier thing to me. But like if you're just kind of like side by side, I think it's very easy to worry about it. To like you need to be mindful of it and have a game plan. But I don't let it scare you out of an industry. I think it's kind of the thing that there are ways to beat these companies that look like they know what they're doing when they actually don't, or they are. Again, I think it's very easy to feel very intimidated by companies that are worth billions of dollars. But there are like so many chinks in their armor if you really, really apply some creativity and thought to it.
As a quick tactical question, for each of your ideas, did you create a separate domain name, separate email address, separate landing page for each one when you went out to sell it?
Yeah, quite a few of them. Yeah, we got through about. I think we got through the two or three names. I think we got through in the end. So yeah, we just swap it out sometimes. I can't remember when we decided to change it or not, but yeah, it was a mess.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about PostHog. So you're done with idea 5. Do you mind explaining how you ended up killing idea number 5, what it was, and then what were the inklings around let's do PostHog, and then like when you felt like, hey, this has product market fit that we haven't experienced yet.
Yeah. So we got into so product number 4 was a technical debt tool where we'd like survey developers what slow you down. Product 5, that didn't work because we couldn't sell it very well. Product 5 was then a suggestion actually from YC of like, or maybe if you can tell when engineers are getting kind of grumpy about things, you probably have a good signal as to who's getting frustrated. Like, why don't you ask the engineers just how they're feeling in these surveys instead and make it about retaining your engineering team? Because everyone's like struggling to retain engineers in San Francisco. It's really competitive. And engineers cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire. People spend like tons of money on recruitment. You basically just pitch like, hey, you just want need to recruit as many people if you solve your churn problem for your engineering team. And so we had like, I booked all these meetings with like, I had like a bunch of meetings with like chief technical officer at like, 200 person startup kind of size companies. And we're running around in person doing these. And we go in and like, I think Tim and I didn't even really like, can you really solve a person problem with a people feeling thing with software that feels wishy-washy? So like, we didn't really believe it. And, like in the meetings, it was like, they definitely feel the same way as us. Like they think this is all bullshit. And so in the end, we're like, so then what we started doing these meetings was going, yeah, it feels like this isn't a problem you have. Can we just ask you something a little bit like very separate? Have you built anything on your infrastructure to understand your user behavior rather than sending it to like someone else's cloud, for example? Like, do you have like some kind of database where you're storing events and stuff? Blah, blah. And people are building these like janky on-premise systems for a bunch of reasons. I'm like, oh, like people actually care about like hosting their own, like quite a lot of companies host their own data infrastructure for a bunch of reasons. And these systems are really painful. No one likes them. And like one of the projects, like Dalton Caldwell was our group partner, one of the partners we work with most closely. And he's like, yeah, if you see companies like maintaining some kind of janky internal system that's kind of like vital to their business, but like everyone hates it, that's usually going to get a product market fit. All right, yeah, we can definitely see that happening kind of for the first ever time. Like literally no one has built, it's actually a mum test thing. Like no, we didn't come across a single company that have built any kind of tooling to try and solve technical debt. We didn't come across a single company that built any kind of tooling to retain good engineers. We had come across a bunch of companies that had like self-built their analytics tools for like various reasons. And so we're like, okay, yeah, we think something open source, self-hostable that made us much more confident in that idea. So that's so we started like literally flipping the meetings and they were like, oh yeah, oh my God, it's like every time. And so we started getting really confident that this is going to work. And then we're like, yeah, this will also be kind of cool and fun. And we kind of know that we could brand this and stuff. So yeah, it just like transformed over this very distinct like 5-day period, basically from one idea to the next.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. I may have missed it. What made you sort of first look at like the analytics stack? What was the first thing of like, let me ask that question?
We were just like frustrated at our own experience setting it up because we were losing data to ad blockers and we couldn't understand. We wanted to write SQL. We didn't trust the graphs that we could see on the screen, basically.
Yeah. And you notice everyone's maintaining it. Do you go back and ask them why aren't they using any of the commercial off-the-shelf solutions that existed currently? Because to your point, there already were large companies.
Yeah, we were just asking like, why do you build this in the first place? Blah blah blah. And like some of them were using cloud competitors, but like quite a lot of them were also that yeah, we just don't want to send data to it. We want more control. We want to write SQL. We want to combine multiple data types. Like we want to combine revenue data with this thing, but like we want more flexibility. um, so it was this, and like we kind of built it, and then we wound up using it for everything. So we realized that a lot of teams hadn't set up a third-party product at all yet.
Yeah.
And so primarily it was around like data security, flexibility. Those are not things that actually have driven PostHog's later growth at all. But it
Yeah.
gave us traction, which then meant we realized actually we think there's a better path. Like we pivoted, like kind of basically pivoted later, like once we had traction and had raised funding, and we're like, oh, actually, we shouldn't be doing open source product analytics. We should be multi-product in cloud. Um,
Yeah.
because we think people are getting annoyed, like shuttling data between all these different tools like product analytics. And so we did that, and then we started growing way quicker still. Um, and like later on, it's become like, oh, we need like a full-on data warehouse that pulls in data from any other system, and then we need like AI. Then we're working on product autonomy, basically. Like we're trying to build self-building products that fix all the issues we can detect in them. So like we really have like repeatedly shifted what we're doing, but it gets easier and easier the more traction you have because you can base it in actual experience of customers rather than like your hypothetical ideas you haven't validated yet.
And this is why you feel 0 to 1's way harder than 1 to 10. Even though the 1 to 10 for you guys did require a pivot, it was just
Yeah.
easier to pivot if you have customers to go to.
Yeah, we had like much easier. Like we had a customer like Ali Regani, who's been on board, who ran continuity at YC, and he worked with Steve Jobs at some point, so he got super cool kind of background. And he's like, when you get bigger, you can see around corners. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And then later on, you're like, oh, I kind of get it now. Like, yeah, once you like have a bunch of stuff happening, you have a bunch of stuff happening rather than like nothing at all. Like I'm no longer harassing people on LinkedIn for like 90% of my working week.
Right.
Like where I can see customers like complaining or praising us or whatever, and I can talk to them if I want to pretty easily. And so it means that if we have big ideas, we can validate them 50 times more easily than we could at the start. So yeah, just that initial little bit helps so much with giving you something real to kind of work on, basically.
That's super interesting. Was this the first time in your 9 months that you started feeling like, oh, wait, the person I'm speaking to actually does have this problem? Was it the first time?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the first time that engineers would love to, well, technical debt problem we worked on, like engineers would love to complain about it for sure, but they were just complaining. It was the first time we saw, concretely, it was the first time we saw people actually trying to solve this particular problem themselves by building something rather than complaining about it,
Yeah.
which is a huge distinction, I think.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so then you build it, but you guys had this very successful launch. How did you design your launch to work successfully? You mentioned you put a lot of work in before you launch. Explain that to me.
So we ran what we term now Hacker News Pre-Mortem. So we basically like, okay, say this goes viral on Hacker News. What are all the ways you what criticism will it get? And so like I looked at previous products that had launched on there and just categorized all the criticism they would get. And it's repeating. It's repeating. It's like there's no pricing model. This is therefore dumb and won't exist. They don't explain what the product does. There are no screenshots. Like it doesn't tell you where the data is going, who's building this, how do I know this is secure. Um, it doesn't explain the problem. Like it's just that sort of criticism, or like, wait, what's the difference between this and like X, Y, Z other thing that seems the same? It's not clearly distinct enough. Um, and so we just made sure that we could tick the box defensively on all those types of things. And we put more energy into the website that we really wanted as a signal how much we cared. Like the fact that we're going very quickly from one idea to another did not mean that we were not trying hard or didn't care, because we really were putting our heart and soul into each idea, which is really critical. It's like you can't just like lazily like AI slop your way from one to the next. It's like you really are going to have to put your heart and soul into it and then pull it out and put it into a different idea like the next week if it's not working. Um, and so we started putting kind of, I was like, well, how can we signal that this isn't going to disappear? Because like the product was free at the start. It was literally an open source project. Um, and like we're not asking for money, but we are asking for time from people, which is just as valuable. And so we're still not going to get usage if we don't do a good job of marketing this thing. Everyone's going to look at the website. The website's a sales team. How can we like let's nail the use cases of the website? And it's like, okay, the website needs to establish that this isn't going to disappear. What do like mature companies that are going to be around have? And it's like their footers have like 30 links. If you look at like, I don't know, go on like harleydavidson.com or something, and there's going to be like 30 links in the footer. Or if you go on like HSBC, it's going to be the same. These websites are massive because they just add loads. And I'm like, we should have a website that feels kind of substantial and beefy, because all our startups at the time would just have like, you click about, it scrolls to like the third strip of content is like, it's built by Joe and Martin or something. And so we're like, we just need to, we need to come across more thoughtful. We want to explain the gaps we have. So for example, we didn't have a paid product at the start, but we had written up how we were going to make money as a business. So we had a game plan for it. And this was also, it turned out very helpful for us it forced us to think through these ideas. Um, we wrote about who we were. Like, we didn't pretend that we were like 1,000 employees or something. It's like, we're James and Tim. Like, like later, like a week later or something, I just read a blog post, like I literally just read a post that was like, what it was like moving to San Francisco to do Y Combinator. Um, and it had like a bunch of photos of us. Like, we walked up, we did like a hike up Twin Peaks and stuff at night. And then people were like, the blog post went viral on Hacker News again a week later, and people were like, man, that's pretty stupid. They went up Twin Peaks on foot without any lights at night. Whereas like, it's like dumb Europeans, whatever, you just walk everywhere. So it's kind of, uh, uh, yeah, we just put that little bit. It's like, I think people often have product thinking and they apply it to their software product, and then it just like leaves their heads as soon as it's anything that's not product. But like, the reality is your website is a product, your pricing is a product, your go-to-market is a product. And like, really just think it through a little bit from first principles, because you'll stand out. And it's like, well, what developers want, like, pricing page needs to have pricing, or at least an explanation why there isn't pricing there. Is not okay to put in book a call and have nothing else listed explaining why it's book a call at least, or something. Like, let's just like think this through a little bit from what our users would want and work backwards from there, as opposed to like, let's grab a random template website that looks the same as like thousands of others, because that just signals that we don't care. I think like Patrick from Stripe is really big on this stuff of sort of, I think it's great from him. It's like, it's very hard to attribute, but he's like, I think a huge reason why we were actually successful at Stripe was we care about design, and it signals to people up front. Like, you wouldn't go to a restaurant where like the lights are off and the sign's falling off the wall or something, or if you're going there, it's for a laugh rather than. And so just like bear in mind, I think as humans are very conditioned to judge on first impressions, and your website is that. So like, and it's not monumental task. Like, just put more effort in than other people do, because then people will give you the goodwill that they'll try out the product properly. So yeah, I think like, we didn't do anything hacky with like get all our friends to upvote it or something clever. It was really the basic thing of like, how can we just provide something we think engineers will enjoy,
Yeah.
and do a good job of the basics.
I've been in this position, founders I know have, where, they'll talk to customer will have this problem, and they'll say, let me go see what's out there. And it turns
Yeah,
out there's like a few seed and Series A companies that are trying to solve that problem. And then you pause and you say, well, they're not getting traction. The company I just spoke with doesn't use them. Maybe maybe this isn't the right solution. Maybe this is not a real problem, and I'm going to move on. I've done this several times before.
yeah.
I bet when you saw people building their, self-hosted stacks, you were like, you Googled it and there were other people doing this, and you did it anyway, right? So like, help me understand that.
Yeah, we just didn't back the execute. The other thing we saw, like, there was some open source, there are a few open source projects that will kind of let you do some of this, but they just all look really dated and clunky and crappy. Like, they didn't look we didn't feel like they were like bleeding edge tech companies working on them that were going to like absolutely nail it. And so we just felt like they were kind of, no one was trying as hard as we were about to.
Mm,
Um, and so we kind of, yeah, so we just tried it and it worked really, really well. And then the like the like more aggressive looking competitors are all focused on cloud instead. And so we thought, hey, and we're like, well, if we're focused on developers, they're not really that focused on developers. On first principles, a developer exists before a product manager does in a startup, because it's usually two technical co-founders. So if we get in first, we're upstream of everything they'll ever buy. So actually, the long term will win if we do this. It was kind of our thought process. And so like the different persona compared to our competition, we thought would kind of work out well. I would be much more wary if you're competing against like, if you don't have like, you just have to. We were quite thoughtful around these types of practical problems. Like, okay, we need to stand out. How are we going to do that? We need to find a way to like, how do we not get screwed in the long run by these bigger companies that are more successful than us? And our game plan was like, if we get in with engineering and we just do a good enough job with engineering and we can see enough ways to do that, I don't think they'll ever move from us to a competitive product, basically, or it'll be like pretty rare.
yeah,
But we'll forever be stronger at getting in at the bottom. It's like getting first. Like, our product strategy for a very long time was build all the tools in one, get in first. So build all the tools in one that people need, get in first. Like, get in with 2-person dev tool startups on day one. So we've always had like really generous like startup programs and like a big free tier. Uh, and be the source of truth for customer and product data, and so just ship everything that means that can happen properly. And those were all quite well reasoned principles, um, designed to think about. So yeah, we were quite thoughtful around this stuff. Like, we did have some. It wasn't just like blind. Like, whatever. It was sort of, no, we can see a way to make this work. And if we'd seen, I think if we'd seen like a bunch of competitors that were small, like ours were like, these just aren't real tech companies with lots of funding. Like we just think that we're going to have to crack this. Like I don't think they're credible. The ones that were credible, we had a valid path to explaining why long term we'd be able to survive competing with them, and that
Yeah.
was enough for us to. That was kind of our thought process, really.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be put off by like two kind of sketchy looking startups that have like tried for 3 months and then failed at all, um, because you don't know like how together they were on sales calls or what they did or did not do. Like most people are not able to pull off getting a startup off the ground, I think. So yeah, just don't index too heavily on what small startups are doing, I think.
Yeah. James, I appreciate your time. You've been more than generous with it. From there, is it a scaling story? I mean, you raise a round again based on your traction, but there's another pivot. So what causes that? What was going through your head at that point? How was the business doing at that point?
Sure. So we kind of built self-hosted, like real open source product analytics. We had this open source project. We worked on it for like a year and a half or so, started with. And because I looked at like every multi-billion-dollar open source company, I couldn't find a single one that hadn't spent at least 5 years working on the open source project before they made any money, that had actually been successful. So I'm like, well, they make money because they have so much traction. They just add pricing to it, basically. Whereas if we start getting really salesy at the start, it's going to kill the community growth anyway, and it's just not going to feel good. And so I'm like, well, we're not going to wait 5 years, but like, I think this market we're in is well established. Like people are making money in product analytics, and so I'm not that worried that people aren't going to pay for this either. I have got, and so, but we need to get traction. Like it's really important we build this community side of it. So we started doing this, and we got to the point where it's like, cool. Now people are asking for a bunch of features that just feel like natural paid features. Like they want things like, I don't know, like multiple projects or enforced single sign-on, all this kind of stuff. So we built like this Teams plan or our enterprise plan, I think we called it at the time, where you could pay us a license fee in your self-hosted software to add a bunch of extra features, and that were oriented towards big companies. And this worked. We're getting like inbound demand this thing. We probably got to like, I don't know, a couple 100,000 run rate from this, which at the time is monumental, compared to like nothing for ages. Um, but then what happened was a bunch of companies were like, we then proceeded to spend our entire lives debugging other people's Kubernetes because people are running this infrastructure that's quite complicated on the side. Our product is actually very poorly suited to self-hosting. It's extremely data intense. The data we have, like if you say you build a product, we probably have more data in like the data PostHog has is probably more data than your production product has because we're logging like every click, every page view, every session recording, every like LM call, for example. And so everyone is outside of their competency in terms of like, you know how to scale your own product just about the level that it's at. And then PostHog's gonna be like the next level up. And so you're just never really gonna know what you're doing, almost by definition is how it felt. And people are taking photos of their AWS account on their phone, logging into our like group Slack with a Gmail account to try and help us debug because they're not allowed to like share their screen with us, for example. And so this just doesn't feel like a very efficient use of time. Like we're manually we're just doing a bunch of professional service we're not charging for it, but like we're having to do this to make this work. And it doesn't feel good for us or for our customers, more importantly. It kind of feels like they're just spending so much time looking after their instance. And so we're like, can we just host it for you? Like why, like just repeat to me back why a lot of customers said yes to this. And we're like, why are you using the cloud products that we've got? Like we've got competition who are better than us at this point. And they're like, they just liked us more. And it was just like, well, like you built a few small features that we prefer more. We much prefer you guys are as a business. And we kind of trust you more or whatever. And so that's just what happened. And so we built a cloud product to self-host so we wouldn't have to self-host as much stuff. Then we saw our revenue on a cloud product would grows like much more easily. And it turned out like, oh, actually, we could have been I don't know if we could have been competing this whole time in cloud, but we're just getting customers for like, we're growing quickly for an objectively worse product in cloud.
Mm.
Just off the back of like brand and awareness and focus on a different audience. And so then we just quickly improved the cloud product. And then we realized, and then at some point we pulled the numbers, and I think it turned out something like the cloud product started growing. And it got to the point where cloud was 90% of our overall revenue and self-hosted was just 10%, even though self-hosted had been growing the whole time. And it was like, oh, cloud is 90% of our revenue, self-hosted is 10%. That 10% for self-hosted is generating 70% of our support tickets. So it's like 50 times harder, rough or something. It's not maths, 50 or something like 50 times harder. Um, this just feels is worse business basically. And also we're not having as much fun running it either. And like we'd like to build a bunch of extra stuff in cloud to go further, and just like we spend way too long like supporting both. Because we come from a place of desperation. Like we've had basically revenue, no real revenue from any other thing we built for like the preceding, like at this point, 2 years or something. It's like, really, we have to go back to zero and like give it away again, these customers to move to the model we think is better still. Um, and the answer was yes, we did have to do that. Because when we eventually did make that call and we went, look, we're going to keep going with the open source project, we'll keep building the open and stuff. But we're just no longer going to charge. We can't charge for this. We're not going to look to keep hold the revenue because it feels wrong. We don't want to keep supporting this. We gave people the license away. Like I think virtually everyone. We got like SOC 2, we got HIPAA, all this stuff, and like virtually everyone moved to cloud. In the end, it was kind of shocking. But we needed like the brand and the credit because they already liked us, they trusted us, and then they were okay to go through the processes with us to move the data to cloud. Because we built the kind of reputation in the open source space. And then, yeah, the cloud product just like blew up basically in terms of growth. Every time we had a new product, we went quicker and quicker, and we could add so many more because we weren't focused on like Kubernetes and infrastructure as much. So yeah, it was a huge shift. But I feel like we're honestly going through something similar at the moment at much, much more scale still. In terms of our, I wouldn't say it's pivot, but it's a real iteration. Like I basically am now like, it's basically like AI. It's like a bunch of data across all these different tools that we offer, and then AI to interpret and do stuff. Whether it's like doing a pull request, doing some kind of analysis, helping figure out what to build, adding a feature flag, whatever it might be. And so all the UX needs to be completely different again. And so we're as quickly as possible trying to get like the next big sort of show-stopping thing out the door. So we're working on some really fun things at the moment, basically. But yeah, we've just continuously shifted what we're doing. So it's been very busy, basically.
This is a good plug for PostHog for our listeners. I imagine you're hiring yourself from fresh off of Series E. Any plug for the audience?
What do I plug? Yeah, I think basically, I think this one, we're working on a desktop product that can run a bunch of cloud instances or any other. You can choose the model you want to use, whether it's like Anthropic, Google, whatever else. The point is though, it is fully integrated with all of our data. So it's like a code editor that literally understands your product and its behavior and usage. And so instead of you being like, please build me this feature, it becomes, here are all the pull requests we've attempted for you overnight based on all the like feedback issues, errors, computer vision, watching your product being used, like all these different data categories that we offer. This one's complete. Do you want to merge it? This one's at like 70%. The agent got stuck here. This one's here, 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 here. So you start working on a pull basis or on a push basis as a developer. So if you want to try something like this, drop me an email. It's james@posthog.com is my plug for today, I think.
Awesome. James, I appreciate you spending all this time with us. I mean, I hope folks will listen to this and think, get out of your head and go build. Because one of the things I was comparing your story versus like Pivot Health Founder Friends, and there's a lot more building in your story. And there's a lot more paying attention to what problems am I experiencing along the course of this, rather than sort of deferring your thinking to the ICP and saying, what problems do you have? Tell me what you have. Instead of sort of indexing on problems that you've experienced. That seems to be the magic. And then don't die, which also seems to be an important part of your story. It's super inspiring. And I definitely will go through sort of my ideation, thinking about, yeah, I wonder how James would think about this, and then iterate accordingly. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing the story.
No, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it was a very, yeah, it's a very existential period of your life to be pivoting a lot. But it does get, it is fundamentally possible to get to product market fit in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, just don't die, I think is probably the number one thing. It is a core variable that gives you longer to get there. So yeah, just take lots of shots. Don't give up. That's just by far and away the most important part of it. And like lean into each idea really, really hard. Don't kind of half-ass two at once, for example.
James, thank you.
Cool, thanks.